Thank you so much, kind sir.
I want to change the backdrop for you.
Oh, why? I quite like
It
that.
says thank you now. It's too early. You say thank you afterwards.
I just want to say there is a whole string of German comedy series that's coming out. If you want to subscribe to it, you can. It hasn't taken off, but but it will certainly come through. I must say, the first time I ever went to Germany was quite an experience. I was a young South African. I think I turned about 18 or 19, and so it's kind of like in the late 1998, somewhere there. I think that's when it was. So I arrive in Germany. I go to a place called Cologne, which is far, in my mind, from where I was coming from. And I arrived in the middle of winter, so which made a double barrel. But when I arrived to this place in Cologne, I see these two young white guys working in the garden. I'll never forget thinking to myself, if this is what the white people are doing, what on earth are the black people doing in this place? I thought, this is extraordinary. I'm not joking when I say this. I went up to these guys and said, can I take a picture with you guys? Because this is a historic moment. I've never seen it in my life. We took pictures together, and I still think to myself, they thought this is weird. I thought that is weird. But it worked out fine in the long run. And I've learned that actually our own prejudices, our own mental frames are exposed when we are confronted with the realities of what South Africa's painful history looks like, and in many ways how we've been programmatized to believe certain things about people. Fellow South Africans, thank you so much for this time this morning. I promise I will not be long, and I'm so privileged to be able to speak to a whole lot of change makers. I think South Africa doesn't have a plan B, it's only got one plan, and ultimately I genuinely believe we don't have a spare South Africa, we've only got this one to work with. Let me up front say congratulations to an incredible initiative and the partnerships that I see here, because they invite me again to say it is within ourselves. We are the ones we've been waiting for. You know, there's no one who's coming to save us. And maybe today I'm not going to speak, I'll speak just as an activist, because at the core of what I do, that's what I stand for. I stand really for the fight to say, when each one of us participate in our country, we could really make a significant nation. I think our country has never been forgotten, never been forsaken, and ultimately we've got an opportunity to build a South Africa that works for everybody. I grew up in Soweto. I grew up to a mother who was a cashier and a father who was a factory worker. We grew up in a town at a time where Gqeberha's Act meant that many famous people would live in the same communities as you. So that at least was somewhat helpful, because all your role models were just down the road from you, right? But at the same time as that, it meant that life was particularly hard, at least in the 80s. I grew up at a time where the economics of our country were such that townships were just suppliers of labor. And so I'd watch my father leave at 6 in the morning and come back at 6 at night without any of that father-son kind of interaction. I had a mother who worked on weekends. And then when she lost her job, she became an entrepreneur. But I would have never called her that, because it felt like a side hustle. She was just trying to survive. We sold eggs to get me through school. So we had this truck that used to bring eggs to our home. We sell them on the side. And I was always amazed. But when I think about it today, I would have never called my mother an entrepreneur, because it just felt like she was just trying to survive. And sometimes the thing about vision and the thing about seeing things is that sometimes we come into communities and I see t-shirts, I see baristas, I see all of that. We don't call them entrepreneurs. But in many ways, part of the vibrancy of this country and particularly in communities such as this one, we need to affirm the entrepreneurial culture. Why? Because at the end of the day, we must remind ourselves that bread sold in the township is not any better than bread sold at the Pick and Pay. They aren't differentiating values. There's bread, just like there's coffee, just like there's whatever. The issue that we've got to reaffirm is the dignity that sits within human beings that says, actually, South Africans are innovative wherever they may be, and our job and our duty is to empower them to be able to achieve that, right? So I'm deeply passionate about some of the work that you are doing here, because I honestly feel there's a powerful, powerful opportunity, and we could really build an unbelievable nation. And also, I want to say, there's an African saying that says it takes a village to raise a child. And for me, I grew up in that village. Sure, when my parents were absent, I had a Catholic nun who took me under her wing, and it's not lost on me that we gather here in Nelson Mandela Bay or in Gqeberha, literally after the 12th of September when Steve Biko died, certainly under the brutality of the apartheid system. But this Catholic nun wanted to remind us of values of black consciousness. She looked me in the eye and she would say to me all the time, Mmusi, you need to remind yourself that actually you are beautiful. Just because the apartheid system says you are less than does not make you less than. She empowered me with a faith that allowed me to believe that actually I've got to be careful not to be preachy, but I'm clear in my head that had it not been for that Catholic nun who said, in you is the divine, I don't know if Mmusi would be able to stand up confidently and speak to South Africans from whatever background they come from. She empowered me with the belief that I could achieve much. Here she was, a principal of a school who said to me, Mmusi, you must never refer to the grass outside your house as just grass. You must refer to it as the lawn. It was in her little way trying to restore the sense of, you can achieve as comparable as anybody else, right? Don't just, she wasn't trying to say speak the Queen's English, but she wanted to just make sure that we knew our worth coming into any space. So if you put Masifunde in a community such as this one, you do what I feel is the starting point of what this country desperately needs. A restoration of values and the value and the dignity in people. Said to students yesterday that Chanua Achebe said it so brilliantly, that a hungry person can never claim freedom. What this country has taken and has lost is the dignity of human beings. We're fast losing that. And that's why it's one of those values inside our constitution that are inalienable. You cannot progressively realize other rights, the right to education, the right to health, all of those things. But the right to dignity is sacrosanct. It's that value of Ubuntu. The idea that in you I see the divine. Or the notion that says, Zuguti, when I find myself in a space where I loot from the people, not only am I committing a crime, but I undermine the dignity of people. I am a husband to one wife. I have 3 kids. And the thing is, if I went outside and sat outside the house as a father and ate KFC, and then wiped my mouth and then walked inside the house and looked at my children and said, no, tonight we have no food, they would look at me and call me an immoral father who has no values. But we forget that our politicians do that all day, all the time. In that they lock themselves in a room and loot from the people and then come back and say, hey guys, we are running out of money. That's not a problem of corruption. That's a problem of a lack of values. The second is the deep need for justice. The idea that if we are going to engage society, we need to exercise justice. As Martin Luther King said, the moral arc of history always bends towards justice. This idea that what apartheid meant as a spatial planning here, that your presence here can redeem what these communities and townships can look like, so that one day prosperity can flow equally across all of society. That is a sense of fighting for justice. The reason I say that is because I can't invite you to say, get involved in the national dialogue or whatever, without knowing what you are getting involved with. And the first starting point must be the ideals of making sure that we bring values of Ubuntu and a sense of deep justice. We have to fight for it with everything inside of us. Because I think if we don't fight for justice, we leave a wound that sits in society open. And we see it manifest in little things. We see it manifest in racism. And people think, we thought we dealt with this racism issue. But there's a wound. Right? We see it manifest in the tensions that we see economically. We see it manifest in policy. When the taxis go on strike in Cape Town and somebody says, oh, it's so nice, we have the roads free to ourselves. I say, do you not realize that actually taxis are a fundamental part of the economy of South Africa and a public good? Right? I hear it at home. I'm married to a white South African. Oh, she's half Welsh, half Lebanese. Which means I live in fear. That's the honest truth. That's the honest truth right there. But, I see her and I walk the streets with her and my kids, and I know that for others, they come to me, they said, Mmusi, you've done so well because you are now married, you've married up. I say, is it up because she's white? Can't say that, right? And then I meet some people who say, this one sold us out. All of those issues emanate from a wound. It's the pain of inferiority and superiority. And unless we're willing to attend to the question of justice, we'll never be adequately able to deal with that wound. It's not just nice, clever cliches that say maybe our kids will be judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skins. But it's attending to that wound so that that can be true. Because if we don't attend to the wound of inferiority and superiority as born out of racial domination, we'll end up with a recycling of nationalism from one to another. And then the words of President Mandela then become very true when he stands up and he says at the Rivonia trial, I have opposed black dominance and I've opposed white dominance. People misquote that so as to fail to recognize that even back then he understood the dangers of a recycling of racial nationalism over another. So yes, I do send my deep condolences to people like Mangosuthu Buthelezi in his passing. But part of me also feels like Zulu nationalism must also be buried with him. Because we can't keep revolving cycles. So, if we restore values based on Ubuntu and justice, what vision do we then hold? And I want to land this here, and maybe practically let's talk about what we can do. Because the temptation is for people to go, you're just here a politic. I'm a recovering politician. Let's put it that way. But there are a couple of things if we're going to stimulate the township economy that we must do. That's why I celebrate programs such as this one. I was speaking to the leadership here and I said to them, one of the things that we've got to be clear about is what do we do for a child in the first 1,000 days of their lives? Often when I speak to moralistic Christians, or at least when you deal with morality as a paternalistic thing, often they get caught up in a debate about the termination of pregnancy and choice. And I go, I understand that debate. I'm schooled enough. But before we even get to who terminates or who does what, can we at least do one thing? Can we introduce a maternal grant so that the mother who is pregnant can eat so that they can feed their child? Because if that child is born stunted because they didn't eat inside the womb, their economic probability is halved. So, I value the work that you do in making sure that even in that first 1,000 days, because often what happens is that a mother leaves the hospital and it takes them 3 months to apply for a child grant to a point where they can't feed the child for 90 days. It's an injustice. So we have to, from a policy point of view, begin to think about the rights of children, that ECD centers become something that we legislate for, fund, and ensure they are functional. That's why the program of Masifunde can only be underpinned by healthy children who are going to excellent ECD centers. Why? Because in truth, our kids cannot read for meaning. 8 out of 10 of our children cannot read for meaning. So yes, fees must fall at higher level, but that only speaks to 12% of our society. For every 100 kids who are born, if they're not going to ECD centers, half of them will drop out of school and only a fraction of them will get bachelor's pass rates that they can end up at university. So if we're going to fix the skills pipeline, let's start with the first 1,000 days. I want to say the second thing we've got to do is we've got to adjudicate on title deeds, especially in townships. And I'm glad this is on a properly titled land. It's the best way to begin economic prosperity for anybody, is that they have an asset with which they can trade against. If my mother did not have a title to our house, she could never have gone to the bank to say, can you lend me some money so I can take this one to university? And so today I did my first degree through UNISA. We had no bucks, so I did UNISA, and I'm sad to see what's going on at UNISA at this point in time. But I'm grateful that that gave me a foundation. Today I'm busy trying to finish a PhD along with the work that I do. But it's out of the fact that there was title that began. You cannot run a business in a township unless you have title to that land. How come is it that when you go to townships, there are no Remexes, what's the other house selling things, Rossins or whatever? Why is that not the case? Because assets in townships are not tradable. Because people don't own the title. If you want to talk about township economies, well, we have to talk about township titles. Otherwise, can I say the elephant in the room? Here's the elephant in the room. Now I'm going to be kicked out, I'm sure of it. What's going to happen is that you end up with immigrants who come into townships, buy that land, and then everybody blames the immigrants. And we start to stoke up the xenophobic fires. Whilst we ignore the fact that we didn't adjudicate title for people first, so I can trade. My fight with the big retailers, I tell them all the time, I say, fine, I don't mind you starting a USave or a Pick and Pay, whatever, in the township. But here's what I will fight for, is that at whatever price Checkers buys bread at, and that bread lands in the township, that must be the same for spaza shops. Because then you don't have to buy bread at USave for 10 rands and 12 rand at a spaza shop. It means that spaza shop is uncompetitive. Let's just land it at the same price. And then if the spaza shop wants to sell it for 15 and it bought it for 10, fair deal. But don't make anti-competitive behavior because of massive wholesale pricing that comes out of big corporates. I'm not anti a USave, I'm just saying there are some economic practices and realities that we need to put. The second is we need to make townships special economic zones. If you can have a center like this, Why can't next door you have a business processing center so that we can run a call center from here? Surely the internet that arrives in Woma or in this community is not much worse than the internet that arrives in Summerstrand. So if the same internet is there, let's give people an opportunity to be able to trade. Why is that? When you talk about justice and values, it means mothers can work closer to home where their children are. People are spending 40% of their income on transport to and from work. If we want to deal with justice, let's create economic conditions where people live. My kids, they benefit from me being Justin J, working close to them. I never expected for my father to ever come to any sports event or anything. It was like, it's like I'm not even wounded by it. Other people are like, I haven't expected. No, I'm not triggered. I'm not with those people. But my kids think it's normal that I'm at their sports game. They in fact become surprised. They go, oh, we were playing today and you were not there. I say, you don't realize the benefit of economic participation close to where I home. Sometimes I sit on the side of the netball field with a Zoom call on the side there. But they benefit. Why can't we do the same for townships? Why can't we give free Wi-Fi in townships? Why can't we make it such that economic participation in communities such as this one can happen? Why don't we support entrepreneurs more? The entrepreneur here and the entrepreneur elsewhere is no different. But to achieve that, we've got to build capital. And this is a fight. I've said to people as reparations, let's build a jobs and justice fund so we can help fund. I know many people, whenever I speak to churches, I say to them, your building is being used only on a Sunday. Surely from Monday to Saturday, it can be an internet hub or a place for people to network and create work opportunities. Why not? Why can't we create these hubs where people can actually trade? But it will need capital. It's going to need money. So I'm hoping that we can create a jobs and justice fund so that actually we can fund economic activity in communities. You should not be limited from your business because you don't have money. And then we must keep our communities safer. I mean, no NGO is going to thrive in communities that are not safe. I was speaking to my daughter, I say to her, when I was a child, my father would say to me, yes, 5 rand, go buy bread. And then you'd walk all the way down. Now I say to them, there's a shop down the road from our house. If I gave you money to say, go buy bread there, would you be able to walk? She says, never. I said, what's your problem? She says, no. I could be attacked by people here. I said, that's not the South Africa I want to live in. The truth is, if mothers, and I want to speak to women, because as a man, I've never walked into an Uber and thought to myself, Ish, I must send a live location every time I'm traveling. Yet women have to do that all the time. That's not the country we must live in. So let me close by challenging you, given all of the politics, given all of the policy, what then should you do? If you remember anything, I want to encourage you to participate. Participate. Now you say, where? The first is, you have to vote. Now you might say, no, now he's come. No. You have to vote though. Because if we don't vote, the truth of the matter is, in the ages of 18 to 20, I heard a stat that says less than 80% of the kids, 80% of the kids are not even registered to vote. And I apologize for calling them kids. They are young people. But it's a concern. Because if that group of citizens are not voting, we open ourselves to a democracy where people can can effectively, you're going to get an olding population deciding the future of a younger population. And then you end up with countries in Africa where the president can hardly see or walk, but they lead a country where the median age is 23. It breaks my heart that when I look in this room and all of the talented people here, all of you are too young to be in parliament. It's sad. I mean, think about it there. It's all of you. All of you. Wait until you are 70, then you can go. It can't be. Surely that's illogical, right? But it begins with the basic civil duty of let's go vote. Let's register to vote. The second is use your voice. You can't just be a Twitter activist. Use your voice. The municipality will table an IDP. Use your voice. The police station will deal with issues of community policing forum. Use your voice. Go participate. We don't. And so decisions are being made parallel, and we tend to think, well, if we just sit back, things are not. We have the voice and we have the power. Use the voice. Go out and speak. I didn't join politics because I wanted to end up in parliament. I actually wanted to join politics because I was working in a business and they were delivering chocolates. I thought, if these guys can deliver chocolates, how can I help the government deliver textbooks? So I put my hand, I went and I wanted to get involved. And I kicked down whatever door. And here's the thing, you'll be surprised. You'll be kicking against an open door, and who you meet on the other side, you'll be amazed and say, Haibo, how did we allow you to be here? That's the honest truth. I'm not trying to demean people, but I was saying to Lupumlo on my way here, we must transcend this thing where people in public service are there because of political connections. We must transcend this thing where we have politicians who don't have degrees. Honestly, like what are we saying to our kids? We're saying to our children, no, when I just be connected, you'll get there. Let's get people who are skilled, competent, who can serve in public life. And then we'll restore the dignity so that we stop thinking politicians are just, these ones who drive around in fancy cars. We need that sense. Use your voice. The third thing is I'm going to ask you to volunteer. You described me as an activist. I earn nothing from the work that I do. I have to do other things to earn money. But I said service to the country will always be free for me. And that comes at a cost to our family. Comes at a massive cost. But that's all volunteer. Because we can participate. We can build entrepreneurship. We can develop an economy that works. And if all of us do it, we can see our communities change. I'm going to use a different township. In Joburg, we have a township called Soshanguve. Soshanguve is just a little bit from Pretoria, the city center of Tshwane. The GDP in Soshanguve is annually over 2 billion rand. But it is unearthed because it sits in a way that it expatriates that capital. It goes and buys goods elsewhere and ignores the economic opportunities that sit within it. And the net consequence of it is that despite the wealth that sits in Soshanguve, Soshanguve still remains poor. Could it be so that despite the wealth that sits in this community still remains poor? I joined politics because I had this faith. I got to be careful, but I'll say it anyways. Someone said to me, what's your favorite verse in the Bible? It was John 3:16. Oh, that's a nice and easy one. What does it mean? Oh, for God so loved the world and all of that. And I've always thought to myself, did God love Dobsonville so much that he placed me there? I guess the question is, and I'm not trying to Christianize the issue, please don't. But if genuinely we care about this community, surely you've been placed here for a particular purpose. And if that is true, Could we not serve in such a way that one day, 10, 15 years from now, we can have the dignity of people restored? We could heal the wound of injustice and have a vision for citizens who are prosperous. It's all in your hands. And if I can partner and work with you to achieve that dream, it will be a great honor. And I'm here committed because I want to see more activists and more people who can change society. It's not going to happen from Parliament. It's going to happen from this room. And if we are alive to it, my gosh, society can change. Thank you very much. And God bless. Let me hand over.